Hi everybody, it's Think Differently Thursday again, and my name's Helen from the Forge Church. I love that every week I get to speak to somebody different, and this week really lovely to be chatting to Philip. Hello Philip.
Hello, Helen. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you.
Good.
Yes, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much. Yep, very
Good.
well.
Philip, I literally think you are one of the people from the Forge that I've messaged a bit, and I think we've spoken a few times over the year, but I don't think I have seen you at all. So it is really great to see you, to see your
Thank you.
face. How are you? How has a crazy different year been for you?
Well, it isn't really much different to my normal life, to be quite honest,
Oh, okay.
because I work at home for probably 75% of the time.
Right,
The rest of the time, I then go traveling to different meetings, but
right.
most of the time is at home now.
Okay. So you're
So,
quite used to doing communication like this then?
well, only recently, I mean, there's
Okay.
been this last year. And I've been using Zoom more than Teams, but some people like Teams better than Zoom. So I bought one of the the business versions of it right at
Yeah.
the beginning. So I was able to run meetings for different organizations, which has
Yeah.
helped.
Brilliant, brilliant. So maybe there haven't been many surprises for you in this time. I kind of feel like for me, because life for me has been quite different, and but some things have surprised me. I like going out and being out, and I thought I would really struggle to be in, but actually I've been really surprised to discover that being in every evening has been really quite nice, and just being quite home based. I've enjoyed much more than I thought I would. Anything that has kind of surprised you about this time?
No, not surprised so much as pleased me. I mean, my neighbours here are brilliant.
Right,
Have been very kind. They live in the other part of the house because I live in a semi-detached house, and they've been fantastic, real
right,
support. And also, I've had amazing support from my friends and family. I
brilliant.
hear from most of them regularly. I mean, Steve Shears, Ray Keeble, particularly Dan Russell, and I could go on. But there's a lot of people I've heard from, and my brother and sister regularly as well. And
Right.
then I've got friends in different parts of the country and hear from them as well. So from that point of view, life isn't that much different because I probably would have heard from them in any case. But
Okay. Yeah,
that's
yeah.
how it is.
Nice that you've kind of named several people there from the Forge as well.
Yeah,
That's really good to know those connections have been
yeah,
going on. I think I've got some like groups of friends that I would like one group that I would go away
mm,
with like perhaps twice in the year, but we wouldn't have
yeah.
loads and loads of conversations during the year, but we've increased our conversations. It's interesting just how
Yeah.
it sort of changed the dynamics of communication a little bit. I think another
Well,
one of my surprises is, and this is quite a surprise to me, how much I have loved walking. So I wouldn't
mm,
never say that I've particularly been a walker, but I've become somebody that walks, and like I get to a
mm,
point in a day, and if I haven't been out and about, I kind of think, oh, I need to get out and get some fresh air. In fact, I've often thought of you because I found myself thinking it would be really nice to have a dog
mm,
because I'm walking so much. And when I think of
yeah.
you, I think of Lottie, your dog, and how she'd come to church and point people in the right direction in the car park. I guess she's been good company during lockdown.
Oh, yeah. I mean, she's good. And I've actually this morning also had a visit from the dogs from next door,
Right.
which there are today, I think 8 of them there. And Lottie was with them, and there was all a bit of a chaotic situation for a little
Sounds
while.
noisy. That sounds noisy
Yeah,
to me.
it was. Yeah, for a while. But yeah, I mean, she's good. She's a good little thing.
Mm,
If I go out in the car, she'll go with me. And yeah, I mean, I always have to walk her. And
yeah.
the only time I didn't recently is the when the ice and snow was here,
Yeah.
because I know we'll probably think about this later, but when I lost my hearing and my balance, I'm not very good on ice, so I have
Right.
to be a bit careful because as well I go down hard. But talking about things I miss, the big thing I miss is probably going out for meals,
Yes.
and regularly did that with groups of people. And there was a group obviously used to go to the White Hart to Stradbroke every 6 weeks. Peter Havers included, and others who,
Mm,
Steve Shears again, and Andrew Fairweather, and all sorts of individuals, and also some people who are not from the Forge. So,
right.
and a close friend of mine who unfortunately died a few years ago used to come, and he always said, "Oh, so it's so strange. I thought you Christians were a funny lot, but he said you're quite normal, really." And I said, "Yeah, yeah, most of us are, yeah."
Yeah,
Yeah, so there we go.
I resonate with that. Yeah, I like eating out, and I've missed that as well. Although it has made me realize probably how
Mm,
much money I spend on
yeah.
food and eating out, because I've really noticed the difference in my bank
Oh,
balance. And so
yeah.
yeah, swings and roundabouts, I guess. Um, just thinking about your dogs, have you are you someone that's always had dogs? Dogs tend to always be in families. Have you always had dogs in the family?
Well, we had dogs on the farm when I was a child,
Mm,
although they tended to live outside. They weren't what you would call a modern type family pet who lived in the house.
right,
I remember they used to have a kennel, and they'd be chained to the kennel and take walks, and that would be it. And I mean, that was quite traditional in the 50s and 60s,
right,
to keep your dogs outside like that.
yeah.
Um, but Lottie obviously lives in the house, and takes over the settee or the chair or whatever she wants to live in. But I've had three black Labradors, and Lottie as the fourth. First dog was 1982. And of course, they tend to live to about 12, 13 years.
Yeah,
Lottie's now 10. Probably, though, as a small dog, she'll go on longer.
right.
They can go on to 18 to 20. So at the
Yeah.
moment, hopefully she'll go on for some time.
I can, yeah, this time has really made me see the attraction
Yeah.
of having a dog. So you
Yeah.
just said about growing up on the farm, or having dogs on the farm. So where was that? Are you one of the Suffolk farming families?
No, no. In fact, there are Freemans who farm in the Debenham area, but they're not anything to do, well, as far as I know, any relation of mine. But we come from Mid Essex near Chelmsford.
Okay. Okay.
Um, my brother still runs the family farm. Well, him and his two sons run the family farm.
Right.
There, they farm now about 2,500 acres,
Right.
and a lot of contract farming, and that's where the farm is. Family are there.
Right. I have this sort of romantic notion about growing up on a farm, like that you'd go and have picnics in the haystacks and you'd just run through golden fields, which possibly is not quite what it was. But I would imagine that growing up on a farm is good fun, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean it's fun. I'm not sure it's the word's fun, but it was good. I mean it's something which you probably appreciate more as you get older.
Yeah.
And the farm, as it would have been when I was a child, in the 50s and 60s, is very different to what it is today.
Okay.
We had a dairy herd then, and so they had to be milked. Cattle had to be milked. Cows had to be milked twice a day. We had a lot of less land because my father was in partnership with my brother and with his brother. So there were three farm partners at that time. And there were, I think, about six, no, not, I think probably in total 6 or 7 men with the three partners on the farm who ran the farm between them. Now, that's very different today because probably it would only be one man who would you account as running that farm,
Yeah.
because things are so different, machines are so different,
Yeah. Yeah.
as any farmer will tell you.
Yeah, definitely. And so
And
did you went to school locally, presumably
no,
you
I went to
okay.
private school in Billericay, which was 15
Ah,
miles from where I lived.
okay.
Used to go every day.
Okay.
Stay there till I did O levels. And that time we didn't have a choice of what O levels, GCE, as opposed to GCSE subjects we took. We were supposed to take 9, because I loathed French and art. I dropped both of those and did the other 7, and then went from there to a sixth form in Chelmsford, where I did sciences and geography for
Okay.
A level.
Right. And then from there on to uni, what did you do at uni?
Well, I went to university. I went to Nottingham,
Okay.
and I there did theology,
Okay.
philosophy, and education.
Right.
because I finished with a Bachelor of Education degree, which was a new degree in those days, as the
Right.
unfortunate abbreviation of BED, which probably is very appropriate for most students. But it is, that was my first degree, and then at the same time, latterly, I was doing teaching practices in various schools in that area, in particularly Mansfield and Newark, and very different from a man who had come from Essex on a farm to industrial areas in Nottinghamshire. Very different type of
Yeah.
life and different types of problems and issues. But no,
Yeah.
it's good.
And
And I'm still in touch with friends from those days.
are you?
I mean, every tends to be most Saturday evenings. One of my friends, we have a phone conversation, and I met him the first day I went to university, because in those days it was nothing like they have today. There used to be several of us would share a room,
Mm,
and I remember going in. I've never let him forget this, but I remember going into the room and meeting the other three people who were going to be in the room with me. And one of them said, and I think it might have been him, said, "Would you mind swapping with," I can't remember the other person's name, because we were all at school together and we would like to. And I've always accused him ever since of rejecting me right at the beginning.
oh.
I mean, it didn't make any odds. I didn't know anybody at all there. So, I mean, it was all very, it didn't matter particularly. But
Yeah.
hello, Lottie's barking. Um, and it but I'm still in touch with him. He's one of my closest friends. And another close, he lives up near Newark. Another one lives near Scunthorpe.
Right.
We
I
can keep.
love old friendships. I think they're a bit like family. I think people that you've kind of navigated so much of
Yeah,
life with. I think, yeah, I love those friendships.
yeah.
So you'd always had this aim then of teaching, had you?
Not really.
Okay.
I just sat in a classroom one day in sixth form, and I always liked geography.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I think I'll be a geography teacher. And
Right.
decided to go to do geography, and ended up going and doing RE and geography and mathematics as other subjects which I trained to teach. But the main subject was obviously theology, and which led on to teaching RE.
Yeah.
And I mean, my background, which probably we'll talk about later, was in the church, so it wasn't anything that I wasn't aware of, shall we say.
Yeah. So tell us about your teaching career then, because I think it probably spanned about 3 decades, did it? What was that
Well,
journey of
I
teaching?
mean, if I go back to the first time I went to school when I was 5, it was 1955. Went into a primary school as a little boy, although I don't think I've ever been a little boy. I think I've always been a reasonably sized boy. And I then, if you think up to today, I've done over 60 years in schools of different shapes and sizes and in different contexts.
Yeah.
In fact, I did a talk to Rotary, my Rotary Club, a few months ago on 63 plus 2 years in schools, because I had 2 years in that time when I wasn't in schools.
Right.
But my first teaching would have been the first teaching practice I did, which was at Sconce Hills County Secondary Modern in Newark. And I went there for the first teaching practice. Then I went to York Street County Secondary Modern in Mansfield, which was in Mansfield Woodhouse, which was sort of one of the mining areas. And then my final one was at a rural secondary school called Misterton. So I
Okay.
was in those schools that time. And then from there, got my first teaching job in Essex at Stansted. I was there for 8 years. I mean, because I was the only RE teacher in the school, I suppose effectively I was head of RE right from the beginning.
Mm.
And then after a couple of years, I was appointed as what was then a new subject called Coordinator of Integrated Studies, which meant I was in charge of all the humanities
Mm.
and English teaching in what then was years 1 and 2, but now would be 7 and 8. And I was still teaching as well. It would have been then CSE and O level
Mm.
religious education. I did do some A level as well. After that, went to Colchester, where I was in the same school for 25 years, where I started
Wow.
as head of the humanities faculty. became a senior teacher after a few years, in charge of finance, buildings, resources, human resources, and then deputy head, which had responsibility for curriculum and also pastoral care at different times, and as well as head teacher as well. So, and that was a biggish school. We had about 1,000 students in it. Now it's
Wow.
about 1,600 in the school, I think, something like that.
Yeah.
But it is, it was a big school for those
Wow.
years.
That's a pretty long and varied career in teaching.
Yeah.
So it's obviously different to you weren't following in family footsteps then, were you, in going
No.
into teaching? You were breaking into something different.
Yeah. I mean, I just before we leave, I was the teaching side. I taught 19 subjects in the end, of which my most greatest claim to fame is to have taught non-French. Now, you might
Non-French.
wonder what non-French is, but non-French was a subject on the timetable of the first school I was at, because the head teacher, who was a linguist, didn't believe that a certain intelligence level of children could learn French. So they did non-French, which
Okay.
was so you did whatever you felt like with these groups of children,
Right.
because there was no curriculum. But in the end, we ended up teaching them European studies, so that actually gave them a bit of
Right.
background on the Europe. But
Right.
that was one of my claims to fame.
Non-French.
Yeah, but so it's good. So sorry, you asked me another question then, but
Just that you obviously kind of stepped away from the path that your father was farming. Was there a pressure to kind of take that on and farm, or was it an easy step to step into something different?
well, I think the probably the main issue was at that stage that probably the farm wouldn't have supported another family.
Okay.
So if I'd have wanted to go on as as a partner eventually, then it could have been difficult with my brother, my father, and my uncle already having their families on. Well, father's family, obviously, I was a member of that, but we were. It would have been quite a strain on the resources of the
Right.
farm.
Mm.
But I didn't really at that stage think about it. I was the first one to go to university
Mm.
from the family, although following the next generation, I think only two of them have completed degree courses.
Right.
One was at Cambridge, doing veterinary science. He's now teaches at the university in the vet school.
Right.
And the other one is a teacher in South Korea.
Oh wow.
He's head of the school there. So,
So maybe
you
you
know,
started something off in your family, a
well,
different sort of
yeah,
career path.
I think it was more that the culture of society changed. I
Yeah.
mean, when I went to university, there was only 5%
Yeah.
who went to university. Now it's something like 50%.
Yeah. Yeah.
And obviously that, there is much more opportunity for people to go to university and
Yeah,
study.
definitely. Although you didn't completely leave farming, did you? Didn't
No,
you run a small farm at some
well,
point? I mean, was that
I think people
alongside
would say
teaching?
I played at a small farm, um,
Okay.
and it was I had a small livestock. Well, I mean, most people would call it a small holding, but not everybody understands what that means. But you could call it a small farm, and I had sheep, cattle, and sometimes pigs on the farm, and I would sell the meat from those animals to people. Sometimes had chickens, sometimes had geese and ducks and things. And Lottie's barking again. I'm going to go and strangle her in a minute. And it was all, um, but it was something I wanted to do and did. And I actually had the small farm, first of all, down near Hoseley, then up here near where I live now in Thrandeston. For 25 years, I was doing that,
Right. Yeah.
and no, that was all. That was all. I mean, it was good. It was hard work sometimes because obviously it didn't have the machinery that most farms
Yeah.
would have, but nonetheless, it was good. And then when I finished teaching, I did actually have a land sort of grounds maintenance type business with
Okay.
tractors and hedge cutters and mowers and things for 10 years.
Right.
And then when I became increasingly decrepit, the older I got, I decided that was too much like hard work. It was a lot easier to sit at a desk
Yeah.
and write and do things for people. So that's
Yeah.
where I moved back to that side of things.
Oh, it does sound really interesting. And I know, so you've been involved with schools for such a long time, and I know you still are on governing bodies and admissions appeals, that kind of thing. So you can't have failed to have seen loads and loads of changes in schools over those times. What would you say have been changes for the better over the years?
Well, I mean, I'm always optimistic about the schools. I think they're excellent, vast majority of them. I think the quality of teacher training now is better than it's ever been.
Mm.
The quality of teaching is probably better than it's ever been. And it is really becoming, they're so well resourced. Can we stop for a moment while I just go and kill Lottie?
Yeah, it's fine. I'll
Hey,
pause this.
stop it.
We're back. We just paused briefly to let Lottie come and join us. Hi, Lottie. See, that's all she wanted. She just wanted to join us.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
But
you were saying, so that's interesting that you think teacher training quality is better as well.
yeah, I mean, there's no doubt at all in my mind that teachers are better today than they ever were. I mean,
Really?
I can remember, and also poor teachers are not tolerated, which is so important because it's the one time that children have to sort their lives out, to make sure their future is secure.
Yeah,
And if they do have poor teaching,
yeah,
then that can affect so many children.
absolutely. Yeah.
And I firmly believe that the work that is done now to make sure that standards are high, although obviously the higher the standards, the more pressure the teachers are under, but then the children only get one chance in education.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
is so important that it's the right, and resources are so different. I mean,
Yeah.
I can remember the first computers coming into schools,
Mm,
and I mean, they were just hardly used at all. Remember the first photocopiers. I mean,
right.
you're far too young to remember Banda machines,
I
and
remember my dad having one. Wasn't it the thing with the big?
that's right.
Yeah, I do remember.
It was a spirit-based
Yes, because it used
machine,
to
which
smell. You have to put
that's
something
right.
in it. Yeah.
And it I mean, I think probably today under health and safety it wouldn't be allowed, but and then there were Roneo printers, all sorts of things like that. But nowadays, I mean, the equipment is just fantastic,
Yeah.
and it's been particularly since during the lockdowns with the remote learning.
Yeah.
The teachers have done a fantastic job there with being able to teach the children who are in school, the vulnerable children or the ones
Mm,
of key workers, but also at the same time teaching the children through Teams or Zoom or whatever at home.
mm,
And schools are putting massive efforts
mm,
to provide an education at home for
mm,
lots of children, and try to help parents as well, because for parents it can't have been easy.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
that has, but schools are different. The one thing which probably would seem very strange to people today is that's changed. When I started teaching, we were still caning children.
Wow.
And I've got a piece of paper which, when I finished teaching, a friend of mine was working in the first school that I taught in, and he went to got a copy of the punishment book where every child who was caned was recorded, and he photocopied and obviously blanked out the children's names, but just where the children had been caned and for what they'd been caned for. And I mean, we've got, for example, and I've actually got a photograph there of
Oh my
of
goodness.
that page. And for example, it is 2 strokes on the seat, which means that the child would have been hit twice with a stick. And that was in 1979.
What was that for?
Um, Most of it would be for being cheeky to teachers, violent, fights, and sometimes truancy.
Right. Yeah.
The list that I haven't got on here, the list of what it was for, but one of the early records in that punishment book was in 1914, and it was a group of boys had truanted to go and watch the soldiers marching off to the First World War. So when they got back to school, the head caned them
Oh my
for
goodness.
truancy, and but it's obviously very, very different. And the cane was quite a different type of thing to the cane you would see in a garden,
Oh,
because
okay.
the cane that a teacher would use would bend and not break, and you could
Right.
actually bend it and touch the two ends, and it was very, like a whip more than a stick, and I'm sure some of the people who will no doubt watch this will remember being caned.
Absolutely.
And it is sometimes, but I mean, that went quite correctly in the early 80s and was banned, but
Yeah.
that is something that a lot of people will remember. And that
Yeah,
made a massive
absolutely.
difference. But it tended to be boys rather than girls that were caned, although girls were caned on occasions. And it would be normally on their hand they'd be caned, whereas boys would be caned on their backside.
Right. Yeah.
But
I wonder if there was more respect for authority in those days, though. Do you think that? I mean, obviously we can't punish in any way like that nowadays, but I
yeah,
just wonder if it in some way enhanced a respect for, I don't know, maybe it was fear, maybe it wasn't a good thing.
well, I mean, it's difficult to say because
Yeah.
you don't know. I mean, most people didn't want to be caned, and would try and behave in a way that they weren't, and the vast majority wouldn't be caned. But it was different. Society was different,
Yeah.
um, and I mean, just the way teaching took place, and
Mm.
it would all be very different today to what it was even 30,
Mm.
20 years ago.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
things are different.
Yeah. It's really
But
refreshing to hear someone that's older talking about things and just talking about now so positively. I think it's often easy to say things were so much better then, because it's just really lovely you saying about the quality of teaching and the training and the resources are just all so much better. It's really lovely to hear.
I went into my first school to teach RE, and I think all the resources I had were some revised version Bibles. And if you know anything about the versions of Bibles, revised version was a very difficult Bible
Mm.
translation. There was no paper or exercise book, so I had to provide for my classes my paper myself.
Really?
I mean, it was just a different world. I mean, they
Well,
taught.
out of your own pocket, you mean?
Oh yeah, out of my own pocket. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been anything for the children to write on, and that went
Wow.
on for some months, and it was very different. I mean, things were, and it was very different to get hold of materials, to get hold
Mm,
of books, anything like that in those days.
mm,
Schools were not resourced anything like they are today.
mm,
And
mm,
if you wanted new chairs or tables or desks or anywhere redecorated, that was almost impossible to achieve.
mm, mm,
And that was how schools were.
mm. And of
Uh,
course, the internet is just such a massive resource. I really noticed the
mm,
difference almost between my training and then me having a student, that whereas I was still going to books for resources and I had a big walk-in cupboard
yeah,
full of things, her first go-to was the internet, and she
yeah,
could so easily find things. And I've grown into it, but I
yeah,
realized that there was a whole cohort of people coming up for whom that was their first port of call. That was where they would go to first, and they were just so savvy with it as well. They could
yeah,
just, and she could knock things up really quickly, and yeah, just a very different way again, which we've all kind of got on board with now. But
yeah.
alongside that, are there things that you think we have lost over the years that that saddens you, that you can look back on and think that actually that has been a loss?
No, I don't think there are. I mean, things change. Everybody changes. Life moves on. And you can't go back. I mean, I remember being bored rigid at times in the 60s
Mm,
because there was such little things to do. Um, and I mean, if you think then there were probably two or three television stations. I mean, radios, yes, you could have your transistor radio. And I remember sitting on a tractor with my transistor radio stuck to my ear so I could listen
mm,
to the commentary on a test match. And
right.
but I mean, nowadays they'll be sitting in a tractor with a cab uh, a radio already in there, and their iPhone and iPod, well, not iPods these days, but iPhones these days, and they're able to get all sorts of entertainment while they're doing fairly
Mm,
monotonous jobs.
mm,
And life is, I mean, life is better for the vast majority of people today than it's ever been. I
mm.
mean, there's a book called Factfulness, which I read some year or 2 or 3 years ago, which gives a picture of how the world really is. Now, to be fair, that it was pre-pandemic, so that will have actually have been affected. And I think on Sunday, Steve mentioned a book that
Ah,
Sarah
yeah,
had got. It's
yeah,
not the same book, but it's
right.
similar type of thing, and it gives a picture of the reality rather than the prejudice.
Okay.
And that is so important to have. But of course, I mean, all these things are only one person's view, but nonetheless, it does make you feel more positive about things.
Yeah, yeah. He talked about that, didn't he, at the end of the
Yeah,
Grand Design series? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
interesting. Really
And that
interesting.
that sort of made me think about that as well.
Mm, yeah. So, Philip, you did a degree in theology and philosophy, and you taught RE. So, you've obviously always had this kind of spiritual interest in life, and you've talked about faith. And I know you're part of our church at the Forge. So, has faith always played a part in your life, or is it something you came to later on?
Oh, and no, I mean, we as a child we went to church. Well, I can remember. I think quite often on a Sunday we would go to three services. The Sunday school would be 10 o'clock, then the adult service at 11, which we would go into. And in the evening, sometimes we would go for another service at 6:30.
Yeah.
And if there was communion as well, it could be four services on a Sunday.
Was that a Baptist church?
No, it was a congregational,
Okay.
which is these days United Reformed Church.
Yeah.
And my brother and my sister still go to the same church that we went to as children.
Right. Okay.
And the family were very, very heavily involved. My parents, my father was the treasurer, although my mother did all the work. And I can remember one Sunday morning, it was a treat for us to go and count the collection
Hmm.
in the vestry. And so that would be part of it, or take the collection. And so yeah, church was a big part of life, and also Sunday school was, whatever you would call today the kids congregation, and there were classes according to your age, and when you got into your teens, as boys we would be in the Bible class, and there was enough of us to run a cricket team and a football team, and we used to sort of have activities. There were youth clubs and that sort of thing,
Mm,
because the church was still a very central part of the life of the village.
mm,
And so we would expect to be involved, and in many ways my brother and sister still have that aspect of their life, the same way as we do with the Forge.
mm.
Have a sort of social
Community.
side to
Mm,
the worship.
mm.
And yeah, I mean, one of the things which I looked up in preparation for this was in a book, and it was a book on Christian theology by Alistair McGrath, who I've just discovered. I read his autobiography. He comes from Belfast, and it was really interesting. And he was talking about John Wesley,
Okay.
and he said that Wesley held that the living core of the Christian faith was revealed in Scripture, illuminated by tradition, brought to life in personal experience, and confirmed by reason. And I think that there's a lot in that
Mm,
we sometimes tend to think of the emotional side of becoming a Christian,
mm,
whereas there is an intellectual side to it as well, and I think that
mm,
is really important. I mean,
mm,
I read theology books. I mean, not all the time, but regularly.
mm.
I tell you who I do like reading. That's Nick Page.
Okay.
He's a friend of Duncan Banks, and he came to one of the men's breakfasts. And his books on the Bible and on Christianity are very amusing as well as interesting.
Mm,
But I've heard a lot of very impressive preachers and teachers. I mean, there was when I was at university, I heard a theologian called Wolfhard Pannenberg, a German Lutheran theologian. He was amazing at talking. Billy Graham, I heard when I was at school. I've heard Ian Paisley in the flesh preaching
Wow.
in his church in Belfast when I used to go over there. And the two people in the past at the Forge who I would compliment on their preaching, and I've done it to their faces as well as I'll do it again now. Steve Fenning and obviously Duncan Banks. I mean, their preaching in the past on a regular basis is some of the best I've ever heard.
Mm.
Now that that is the teaching that is fantastic. Um, and I listen to podcasts. I listen to Andy Stanley regularly on a Sunday morning. I like his preaching and teaching, and I think he's very good. I've listened to Kyle Presley, who is actually not Presley, Paisley, who is at Alton Broad Presbyterian Church, who is the son of Ian Paisley,
Mm.
and I've listened to some of his talks as well. So try and get a spread of information.
Mm. Sounds like you have loads and loads and loads of input that you really feed your mind really, really well. What would you say is the outworking of that? What's the impact for you of being a Christian? You obviously came to a point in your life where you made a decision that you wanted to be committed
Yeah,
to this life. What would you say is the impact of that in your life?
just going back to the point. I mean, I was christened as a baby. In those days, it was infant baptism. When I was at university, I was baptized in a Baptist church. I did feel a bit sorry for the minister who tried to baptize me on his own because I've always been fairly big, and he nearly couldn't bring me up out of the water, which was, I'm sure, very amusing for everybody else except him and me. So I was baptized then. But I mean, church and Christian faith has been part of my life throughout my life. I mean, I did have a period some 20 years ago when there were problems, and we'll talk about those no doubt later, when things became difficult. But the thing I think about, I mean, why what I do as a Christian is related to service, it's related to duty, and it's related to volunteering.
Okay.
And I think those sorts of things are so important. And the other thing, which some people will find possibly hard to accept, is I don't drink alcohol. And I would never drink alcohol because I've seen how much harm and damage it does. When I sat as a magistrate, I always reckoned we dealt with about 75% of the cases we dealt with were alcohol related. I've had two friends who've died because of their misuse of alcohol. And I just find I mean, it's up to individuals, their decision, but I just find that the use of alcohol unacceptable for me
Right.
as a Christian.
Okay.
And I mean, other people would disagree, I'm sure, but that's how I feel about it. And so those are the areas, but particularly service, volunteering, and a
Yeah.
sense of duty. And it's my duty to work on behalf of the church. And I do various things, as you know, to help the church. I mean, I've been
Yeah.
company secretary at the Forge. I have the pleasure of looking after health and
Health and
safety,
safety. I'm so pleased you do
which
that.
everybody hates.
Oh, but I love that you do it.
And it's one of those things that unfortunately has to be done. In a litigious society, we have to be on top of those sorts of things.
Yeah.
And it is those sorts of things we should do. But that goes again beyond my immediate Christian beliefs. It also is associated with my membership of a Rotary Club. When I was a magistrate, associated with that, there was public duties. So these sorts of things are all part of the life that I have, and I think are so
Yeah.
important that people are involved with
Yeah. It's
and prepared to
interesting
give
that
the time.
because I think people. Oh, your dog is barking, and now my phone is ringing. We'll just ignore that. But that as an outworking of your faith, your relationship with God, a big part of that is service, and as you say, lots of volunteering. And you've given us loads of examples of the things you do. And I know you're heavily involved at the Forge, and you're just bringing it to my mind now that just recently we've talked about, because of coming back together and needing to get volunteer teams back together again. So it's important, isn't it? But how would you put that into words? Why is that an important part of being part of church?
because I believe, I mean, basically, if I wasn't a Christian, I'm not sure whether I would be doing those things.
Mm,
And I think it is because I know ultimately I'm going to be answerable for what I've done. Some of the things I've done which I shouldn't have done, and some of the things which I've done which I'm pleased I've done. And it is, that is life.
mm,
I
mm,
mean, we all face difficulties, we all face problems. And I think, we have to just do our best within the mercy of Jesus and God. We have to hope that we are doing what's right.
mm. Yeah, and he said, didn't he? We've all got a part to play. We're all
Mm.
part of this body. That we all need each other to make it function. So,
Yeah,
for instance, with you and I, health and safety is not going to tick my boxes, but you're so good at it, and it's just something that like you do well, and it's just great that we kind of each of us find our thing that is our passion and our role, and we all make up the entire body of the church, don't we?
yeah,
It's
that's right.
it's interesting. Do you remember a time when you made an actual decision to become a Christian, or for you, did it feel like it was something that gradually evolved over time?
I think I thought I always was a Christian.
Right.
And I think because of the way we were brought up as children and attended church, and also I continued through my life. I suppose when I was baptized while I was at university, that was a sign of commitment.
Yeah.
Um, and but after that, I carried on. I used to take services in the past. I've done some preaching, and I remember the two of us who were on the theology course used to go out and take services in local churches. And as you can imagine, people would look on that as being quite strange, for people who were students at college.
Mm,
We were disappearing on a Sunday evening or a Sunday morning and taking services, and there was always a bit of a uh, people were suspicious, I suppose, or almost looked down on those of us who did theology and so on, because it was a strange thing for anybody to do.
mm,
Um, but because of I mean, I'm difficult to ignore because I'm big, and people, had to accept that I was there. I wasn't going to be somebody who hid away in the corners. But I also played a lot of sport, and I mean, I played cricket, I played rugby, hockey, volleyball, basketball as well a bit, but badminton, also shoot. I mean, I've done a lot of played a lot of sport, and I did a lot of sport at college, and got to know a lot of people, through
mm,
that, which was
mm,
always very good.
mm,
Um, and also because I'd worked on the farm for a year between leaving school and going to university, I'd earned money to buy a car.
right.
So if we wanted to go somewhere for a cricket match, my car would be used to carry the kit and some of the players. And in the late 60s, that was unusual for a student to have a car.
Right.
And so people were quite keen to be part of a group. If we went out for an evening, I would be the driver because I didn't drink alcohol. That was easy. Everybody else could do what they liked.
Yeah.
And that was quite a social side to life as well, which I had.
Yeah. Yeah. And you, a moment ago, you alluded to some difficulties 20 years ago, so ago. And so I know that you, and I think you talked about it when you talked about balance on ice, you lost your hearing, which I think was back in 2000. And more recently, you've had cancer. So, would you say that being a Christian and having faith has helped you during times that are difficult?
Yeah, I mean, no doubt it has. I mean, being a Christian doesn't mean you've got a celestial insurance policy that protects you from everything that's bad. I
No.
mean, the book of Job deals with this, in detail. And I mean, the question is, and I'm sure we've had preaching on it, I'm pretty certain in recent years we've had preaching on the problem of evil. why do bad people prosper? Why do good people suffer? Now, I'm not saying that I'm either good or bad, but if I, as a Christian, why have I had a bad time? Well, that's how life is.
Yeah.
That is what happens, and there's and my faith helps me through it. I mean, we had a difficult time at the school I was at, where I found the head teacher before me had financial irregularities, it was described as, and I managed the financial side of the school. It ended up with a lot of problems, a lot of difficulties, and the BBC got involved.
Oh, wow.
And I was a member of the National Association of Head Teachers, and they took up my case on my behalf and sued the BBC for libel. And I won a libel case against the BBC in about 1997.
Wow.
And so that was not an easy time.
Yeah.
And that had impact on my health as well, and on life generally. And these things, that is how life is. And I just hope and pray that I come through things and manage them as well as I can, dependent on my faith. And I'm grateful for all the good things, and I mean, I'm very blessed with many good things. But also, and as I've said earlier, one of my great things and great things I'm most grateful for are all my friends and my family, and I've been grateful for them. I mentioned earlier on my neighbours who feed me every Sunday evening with a roast dinner. And fantastic, and also will send around food parcels during the week. So it is, it's fantastic, really, that the support I get from people.
Brilliant.
And that's why I try and support other people as well.
Which I know you do so well. And we're getting closer. We've had a year where we've not met face to face as a church, and we're now looking at doing that at the end of June for the first time. What are you looking forward to about coming back together?
It'd be nice to see the people who I haven't seen for a year.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I've seen Steve. He actually called round a couple of times just to drop some things in the last year. I've seen Steve Shears bring me some meat, and I'm trying to think who else I've seen. I don't think I've really physically seen anybody else.
Right.
The last time I saw my family was when I went to my nephew's funeral last August, which was the last time, although I'm hoping to go down on Sunday because they're going to have an outdoor service on Sunday morning, Easter service. So I'm going to go down to that, although I shan't be able to go to the home really because I won't be able to go in or anything. So it will just be a journey down there for the service and then come away. So, those sorts of things, and just to see people again. But, I've coped with it, I've got through it. And there's a lot of people who are in a much more difficult position than I am.
Yeah, definitely. I think it will be, I think it'll almost feel odd to be with other people in the same way again. Maybe it'll feel like we've never been apart, I don't know. So it's lovely to chat to you. It's lovely to hear a bit more about your life and just to hear about how you're doing. As a last question, it was a few weeks ago I spoke to Lois Sparks, who's off at uni in Winchester. So as a last question, it's not an easy one, it's quite a hard one. As a last question, with all of your life experience, and you've told us about lots of things that you've done and been involved with, what would your advice be, in a nutshell, to a 20-year-old with all of that life ahead of her? What would your advice be?
Well, I mean, if going off to university, take advantage of the opportunities you're going to have there, because many of them will never come again, and that's probably going to be the best time of your life, to be honest, because although there's pressure and study, and I know a friend of mine's daughter went to Cambridge University, and the work she had to do, the level of work expected was phenomenal. But take advantage of the opportunities, take advantage of the activities that are there. But I mean, if you're a Christian, remember you are a Christian, and that is also part of your life. And part of the responsibility of a Christian is to help others and to keep an eye on your friends,
Yeah.
make sure they're kept safe and helped when they need to be. Because for many people, that'll be the first time they've been away from home
Mm,
for any length of
mm,
time, and it's quite a different life and quite a different environment.
mm,
And just do that. And as I said, I being a Christian and being a somebody who was studying religion, was looked on as a bit odd, a bit of a strange person. And But just show them that you're not strange. It's quite normal what you are,
mm,
but within restrictions.
mm, mm. Yeah. Great. Oh, I think that's good advice for us all to be looking out for each other, definitely. Thank you so much. Really
Okay.
lovely to chat to you this afternoon. I'm really grateful for your time. We're always so grateful for all that you do at the Forge, and realise that, yeah, you play such a vital role there and such a good role model of what it is to serve and to be involved. So yeah, thank you so much. Really looking forward to when we actually see you physically in person. Will be a happy day, definitely.
Mhm.
But thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks
See you
very much.
soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.